later, knowing that everything was completed. And so that the scriptures would be fulfilled, Jesus cries out, I am thirsty. I thirst. John 19:28. Wow. This is so amazing to me that in the midst of all his suffering, Jesus cries out, I thirst. I think he was thirsty, obviously, but it's to fulfill the scripture. In his anguish, he remains so clear-headed that he's aware of the prophecy of the Psalms in 69:21, where it still needed to be fulfilled, where for my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. Wow. There's so many portrayals of Christ on the cross, everything from the greatest story ever told to Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. I mean, how many of you can remember what it was like when the Passion movie was over and nobody moved in the theater and there was a stillness there because it was so impactful? One of the most dramatic and stirring depictions of Christ on the cross that I've seen or experienced was actually in southern Israel, in this place called Arad. It was kind of a garage, but it was more like a big tent. And he was an artist. He was a Canadian-born artist living in Israel. He actually became an Israeli war hero in the IDF. His name is Rick Warnke. And he, as an artist, he felt God had given him this call or a vision. And he didn't want to do it because nobody had ever had the guts to do anything like this before. But he turned his tent thing into a studio, and he sculpted in iron or bronze or whatever it was, and emerging out of Jerusalem stone, which is the most common stone in Israel. Buildings are made of this Jerusalem stone. Christ on the cross, but he interplayed it or posed it with the Holocaust. It's based on the 7 sayings of the cross, but every saying is connected with a Holocaust victim. And it's a dialogue between the sufferings of Christ and the sufferings of the Holocaust. Oh my goodness, there is nothing like this in the world. Nobody has ever had the guts to put this out there like this, to put these two things together, the greatest, most painful memories of Israel, the crucifixion of Christ and the Holocaust and all that meant, and the sufferings of, and put these two together. The statues of Christ show him hanging on the cross, but it's not really actually on the cross. He's emerging from the Jerusalem stone, and he's crying out these 7 sayings. And if you're there when Rick is there, he actually is explaining everything. Otherwise, it's a digital voiceover thing, and it's just dramatic. And he goes through each of these sayings with a corresponding sculpture of a Holocaust victim at the bottom of the cross, interacting with Christ himself. And it's the sayings so tie into the Holocaust. The feelings, victims mouthing the sense of abandonment, mouthing oh my God, why have you forsaken me? Or mouthing the painful, the I thirst, because they just could not get enough water even, or maybe even the care for other people, the care for the family, care for other victims, and then even forgiveness is in there. When he talks about Christ saying, I thirst, Winnicky says Jesus declared himself living water. He's the source of living water. And now he's crying out, I thirst. It must mean that he's got nothing left. He's given every drop of himself. The concentration camp inmates would say that they had no more tears to shed. They had no more emotions remaining. It brought this dryness to their soul. And the crucifixion brings redemption to the dryness of soul, to this place of spiritual dryness or thirst. And Jesus knew it personally, and he knew it. And therefore, in order for him to fully intercede for us, he had to experience what we experienced, that full identification of spiritual dryness and thirst. And how much more does he identify with his own people that went through such atrocities, people thirsting, and even more so for that spiritual matter. Whoever drinks of this, drinks of me, of this water I have, he says, will never thirst. You'll drink of that normal water, you're going to thirst again. But you drink of me, you shall never thirst again. He told that to the Samaritan woman in John 4. Whoever drinks of the water I give them, they'll never thirst. The water that I should give them would become like a fountain of living water springing up into everlasting life. Wow. Jesus thirsted. He walked more than a mile in our shoes. Maybe it's time that we walked a mile in his shoes and we understood what it means to thirst for spiritual quenching. Discover what he knew, that blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Do you cry out, I thirst? For you will be filled when you thirst for that kind of quench. Jesus still is a living water, and he still has living water for you to drink and to give to others.